Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jason Lehman. I'm the marketing team lead here at Fishbowl Solutions, and today we are going to be discussing understanding Oracle's current and future options for content management. Want to welcome today's speakers. I'm in the room with my colleague Jerry Aber. Hey Jerry.
Good afternoon, Jason.
And on the phone remotely is our Director of Product Development, Greg Bollum. Hey, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
Greg will be joining us a little later to talk about one of the new products we're developing to integrate WebCenter with Microsoft Teams. And here's our agenda for today's meeting. So with that, let's get started.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Jason. Part of our activities here at Fishbowl is we want to make sure we keep our customers informed with where WebCenter is going and what some of the art of the possible is to help solve some of those costly and frustrating knowledge sharing problems you encounter day in and day out. So one of the first things we want to hit on is some of the highlights and some of the features you may not know about. There's been a lot of updates since 2016 when 12c was introduced, and we'll get excited about a little bit about the roadmap and where 14c is going to be going and how we can kind of tie some of that interoperability to the cloud and how you might think about your cloud strategy when it comes to managing content. That interoperability has a number of different ways of making that happen. We'll touch on a couple of those features today that will kind of hopefully stem the thought process for you, and then discuss a little bit on new ways to integrate WebCenter with Microsoft Teams, because as you know, a lot of collaboration activities are taking place these days, and Teams has a nice way of preventing an interface for us to share content with. So what are your current and future options with Oracle Enterprise Content Management? First one obviously is to stay on WebCenter. There's new features in 12c, and there's new version planned with 14 coming out, and you've got a significant investment in your platform. You want to make sure you can take advantage of that and extend the use of that to solve the problems within your ecosystem. Another option is to work with containerization for those customers that have a containerization strategy running with Dockers and Kubernetes. That is on the roadmap, and we can enable management of that platform with those tools. You might take a lift and shift approach, where you might lift the complete instance on-prem to your strategy in the cloud from an IaaS perspective, and there's other options from a platform as a service perspective as well, as you might consider cutting your data center costs and moving to your cloud strategy. And that cloud strategy might involve more of a hybrid model where you have a little bit of on-prem, and you might have some cloud, and you mix those together to solve those problems you might have within your environment. And that could also include maybe a full move to Oracle Content and Experience Cloud, depending on how your use cases fit into that platform. Before we get into too much detail, just want to make sure we share the Oracle Safe Harbor statement. Since we are sharing the roadmap, we are sharing the Oracle Safe Harbor statement as well here. What we'd like to get into is the 12c features, and we'll work our way back a little bit from 12.2.1.4. That is the latest and greatest release that has been released from Oracle over the last 6 months. For those of you that might not know, WebCenter has a long and storied history that came from the Stellent days, working through the acquisition of BEA for Portal, and the FatWire acquisition makes up the third and final element of the three main pillars of the WebCenter platform in terms of sites. The thing I want to call out there, for those who don't know, is that 14c is scheduled for that late 2021 or early 2022 timeframe. And so Oracle is putting a significant investment in there, and there have been several releases in 12c, for those of you who might not know, since 2016. If my counts are correct, just a quick little note here, there's been 9 releases on WebCenter content, 9 on WebCenter capture, 2 on the application adapters, 3 for imaging, and 3 for forms recognition. Each one of those releases has 3, 4, or 5 different sets of features or updates as a result of that release since 2016. Our focus today is going to be mostly on WebCenter content and imaging side of the house, but we'll highlight some of the more interesting released items and the roadmap from 14c. That'll be around the core product enhancements, improvements in interoperability, and then management ease. And just want to make sure you kind of see that Oracle is making a significant investment in the future, including areas that will align with how your customers might be looking to move to the cloud or work within a hybrid cloud model. The first one that stands out in terms of 12C that was released a couple releases ago is the integration with the Elasticsearch engine. For those of you who don't know, Elasticsearch is a distributed free open source analytics engine for all types of data, including textual, numerical, structured, and unstructured information. Oracle has enabled an integration with this search engine for WebCenter. This model requires a separate infrastructure that you have to install to deploy the Elastic platform, while WebCenter supports the configuration to connect with that platform to perform the search indexing with no visual impact to your WebCenter users. They will see and work with the WebCenter UI just like they have done in the past. Recently, there's been support for the securing the Elasticsearch on Windows clusters, as well as monitoring Elasticsearch cluster health have been added, and updated the steps for securing Elasticsearch on a Unix cluster. For those customers who might be thinking about a cloud strategy, you can take WebCenter cloud, but you can also take the Elasticsearch platform to an infrastructure as a service platform with a similar configuration. Some of the main reasons you might want to consider the Elasticsearch is around indexing. Some of the challenges in the past on WebCenter Oracle text search indexing has been collection rebuilds, or index rebuilds for large installations might take quite a bit of time. So we did some statistics and mapped them up to some Oracle statistics as well. So the re-indexing scenario in terms of the performance findings are when we did 10,000 documents, the OTS reindex took 2 hours. The Elastic reindex took 7 minutes. And Oracle also provided an example of 620,000 items where OTS took 8.5 hours and Elastic took 7. So you will see a significant update in performance from that perspective when you run the Elasticsearch indexing engine against Oracle content. You can use Elasticsearch to index other types of content as well and leverage the Kibana interface to manage that information and provide dashboards and statistics around how you're performing in that space. Moving to Elastic and not using OTS requires you to perform a full reindex. And on average, that reindexing to migrate to Elastic takes about 1.7 hours, roughly for the 620,000 items. The next update we thought might be interesting for some folks, those are desktop integration suite users. Desktop client software enables you to interact with the content servers for files and the files directly from Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint if you haven't used it before. You can perform a number of content management tasks, including opening Microsoft Documents from a content server, a checkout function, saving documents, a check-in function, and searching for documents on the server and comparing document revisions through that Microsoft UI. And supports now, this latest update supports Office 365 Desktop and Office 2019. We're going to pick up on the next feature that some customers might find interesting, and that's the disabling of the trash folder. So this feature allows you to configure the framework folders component in WebCenter content to enable or disable trash. It's available to the users having administrator access, and you basically choose the administration option, framework folders configuration, then trash configuration. And basically by default, this is enabled, it's turned on. And so it's useful for customers who are not interested in keeping deleted documents via the trash folder process. One of those interoperability moments or features that Oracle is putting into the WebCenter piece from a release standpoint is Oracle Autonomous Database support. Since one of Oracle's mainstay products is database, it's only natural that the WebCenter product be certified for Oracle Autonomous Database. In many cases, customers will share the database server farms and place WebCenter schemas within that platform, and WebCenter will allow you to use the database platform to deploy those schemas in and take advantage of the autonomous features. So from a total cost of ownership perspective, if a customer is trying to standardize on a database platform and version, you can align the WebCenter platform to work with that. And like I mentioned before, this is a cloud readiness or interoperability component, because you can then move to Oracle Autonomous Database in the cloud as well. Next on our list is the SAML-based SSO. SAML, for those of you who don't know, it stands for Security Assertion Markup Language, and it's an open standard for exchanging that authentication and authorization between basically parties and applications. So when should you use this? Most customers that are doing this are kind of driving with Active Directory or maybe on-premise with Oracle Identity and Access Management. But as you begin to move to the cloud, Oracle Identity Cloud Service supports this SAML cross-platform authentication between apps. And you might want to drive IDCS as your main authentication platform for WebCenter on-prem, WebCenter in cloud, and whatever SaaS integrations you might take place on your cloud platform. Some of the use cases are when you should use. When at least one actor or participant in the enterprise, then you might want to use SAML and then provide an access to a partner or customer application to make that connectivity work between, say, the SaaS platform and identity management and WebCenter. So WebCenter WebLogic will now support this through the security provider configuration in order to achieve the SSO within WebCenter for this type of protocol. For those you don't know, the latest version is 2.0. This protocol has been around for several years, so very tried and tested. Again, this is another opportunity for that cloud integration. Next, we have a number of customers that are doing AP-type processing, from capture to forms recognition to WebCenter imaging. And then those customers who are using WebCenter forms recognition, there's an AP project for data extraction from an invoice. So it's good news for you that there's been an update called AP 2803 that came out here within the last year. When any customer downloads WFR, they get a sample pre-trained AP package project, which automates the data entry of invoices, purchase orders, and non-purchase orders. And for a long time, Oracle was using that 100X version of AP project, and now they've upgraded to the 2803 version. Introduced a couple new features through that process and some bug fixes, but the ones I want to highlight are the ones where the WFR Solution Configuration Manager allows you to create and work with the INI files that you used to have to hit on the file system directly with an editor. You can do that with a web interface now. At that point in time when you were using the INI files, it was not secured and protected, and on this release, they introduced a new way of keeping that configuration in the database compared to the INI file. Another feature is the client ID option, which allows you to manage the AP package in a much better way and will provide you a multi-tenant capability within that solution. And there's new database schemas. Now you can support separate schemas for each AP project from the original schema for WFR SCM tool. So just to kind of give everybody a heads up on the extended policy. So for those you might not be aware, when Premier support ends, you can purchase extending support, but you might notice how the price goes up after years 6 and 7. So once you get into extended support, then you're on your way eventually to being out of support. But what we do want to make sure you call out is that we're into that stage of extended support now, with the Premier support ending in 2022 and extended support ends 2025 for 12C. So if you're on 11G, you're kind of maybe thinking about moving off of that and getting upgraded to 12C as soon as possible, and we can help with that to keep you in compliance. But you also might see an uptick in your cost from a maintenance standpoint once you hit the extended support.
And Jerry, if I may real quick, just again, the reason why we wanted to highlight this slide again, we shared this in other presentations, is if you're going to stay on WebCenter, continue to invest, you're supported on 12C out through 2025.
Thanks, Jason. So let's get to some of the roadmap items from 12C to 14C and beyond. A number of these are already been prioritized and are going to focus on the new release 14.1.2. We're not going to cover all of these, but I do want to pick up, we're going to cover a little bit of them with respect to the Docker and Kubernetes-based images for better manageability, but they're going to be doing REST API support, new archiver framework folder migration, and new theme and intuitive interface is going to come down the pipe as a result of some changes that Oracle has branding over the last years. Some of the future items is that auto scaling with Web Study Content Kubernetes, support for large DID or the doc ID, and then removing of the upload and download applet dependency. And they'll be pushing more towards quarterly bundle patches with fixes and enhancement requests. So you're going to see more updates come faster as a result of that. You might be seeing them now, but they're going to continue to stay on top of that quarterly release process. From an imaging roadmap perspective, you're going to see updates with respect to WFR, IPM, and capture as they continue to improve that platform from end to end for the AP imaging process, importing documents through the REST APIs, email support for OAuth and Gmail, e-invoicing, XML-based invoice processing, and then eventually you're going to see more of a new WFR engine with better OCR and extraction capabilities. IPM, options to rearrange order of fields, and on the capture side of things, enhancing and mapping to that e-invoicing capability. From a portal perspective, for those customers that might be on portal, you're going to see similar scenarios from an infrastructure interoperability perspective, where the Docker image that will be there and easier for maintaining Web Center portal. They will be putting that app tier on the Dockers and Kubernetes model, and then additional areas for interoperability for load balancers as a service and the autonomous transaction processing database support. There's also some future items to be released for those customers. We'll talk a little bit about this here in a minute, Oracle Content Experience Cloud, but there's also an opportunity to connect with OCE as the backend for portal, and then provide WC Portal as a headless service in one of the upcoming major releases. And to make sure you're aware of where 14C is going, the anticipated support through 2031 is where the 14C is going to sit. So we've got quite an investment with 14C coming out in the next 8 to 12 months. You should know that first 14C will be supported through 2031 with the premier support, not ending until 2028. That puts Web Center out there quite a ways from a support perspective, and thereby protecting that investment you have and providing you some comfort as you try and get greater adoption for Web Center in your environment. So let's talk about one of the big updates that's coming in the 14C around Docker and Kubernetes. Businesses have been moving quite fast to adopt what's called containerization. For those of you who don't know what that is, containerization is the process of packaging an application along with its libraries and frameworks and configuration files so it can be run on different computing environments efficiently, and then allow for encapsulation of that environment application in its required environments. Basically, containerizing it into one nice, pretty package. Kind of the benefits of doing that are portability, improved portability and scalability, fast deployments, enhanced productivity, and improved security. And the basis for this model is around the Dockers and Kubernetes definition and structure, so which is an industry standard with respect to managing containerization. And if you're a dev shop that is starting to transform into maybe a DevOps or a DevSecOps type of model with supported code and infrastructure deployments, this time-to-market approach and agility will provide that competitive balance and competitive adjustment you need to kind of stay ahead of the game with your platforms. So a little bit about Docker and Kubernetes. So Docker is basically helps to create the container, and Kubernetes allows you to manage them at runtime. You use Docker for packaging and shipping the app, and then you employ Kubernetes to deploy and scale your app. And this is done through a concept called pods. Pods are the smallest, most basic deployable object in Kubernetes, and that pod represents a single instance of a running process in your cluster. If you look at that first picture off to the left, bottom left, you'll see a single pod has WCS, WCP, or WCC, content, sites, or portal, with maybe some other applications, and Elasticsearch on that pod, all contained together for easy deployment. That pod contains one or more containers, such as Docker's containers, and when a pod runs, multiple containers, the containers are managed in a single entry and share the pod's resources. So as you can see from the diagram, as you build out your pods and you've structured your pods, you can add pods to help scale up. So a couple of our customers have scaled up, for example, Portal over the years to meet open enrollment timeframes, and that activity means they need to scale or build their platform for the peak time. And that peak time can be a little bit of a challenge because you're wasting resources. So some of the benefits of working with an environment is the quick and easy creation of new instances for Web Center content, test or deploying a component on a fresh installation, saving CPU costs of running an entire VM just for Web Center, and sharing containerized instances without worrying about environment compatibility. And the biggest benefit, like I was mentioning before containerization, you need to scale up to meet your highest peak. Even though 80% of that, 80% of the time, you may never hit that peak. Therefore, you basically wasted resources that could have been used elsewhere. This model will then allow you to provide a much simpler scaling and optimal use of those resources. So it's a very popular model in terms of rolling that out and providing your ability to manage that total cost of ownership of your platform. So when you take and consider moving Web Center to the cloud, there's a couple of different options you can make that happen with. So from a Web Center perspective, there's multiple options to do that. There's obviously huge benefits to your organization to consider cloud versus on-prem with respect to the data center savings you can have, as well as management of that platform. So from a Web Center perspective, we've got moving to IaaS and just lifting and shifting your Web Center content instance into an infrastructure as a service model. on bare metal, on VMs, or in a containerization scenario. The second one is, middle one is alternative or replacement, where you might leverage Oracle Content Experience Cloud and maybe enable and enhance that environment with Process Service or Visual Builder Cloud Service to add some additional components and manage it within the Content Experience Cloud platform. And the other one, from a WebCenter perspective, is another lift and shift model, but it's leveraging Portal. Oracle has WebCenter Portal Cloud Service as a PaaS offering, and that has obviously WebCenter content underneath the covers. So when you're considering that lift and shift to OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, you can take that containerization model, you can bring your own license, you can deploy to your own VMs, deploy database to that environment, or leverage PaaS services to extend that environment, like Database Cloud Service, Identity Cloud Service, or integrations through something, a tool called Oracle Integration Cloud, which allows you to integrate ERP directly with other solutions through a no-code, low-code type of environment. So Doctors might be your first path to make that model work, but you also could probably set up a new instance on IaaS, migrate that CMU bundle over, and then migrate the content, maybe do a transformation at that point in time. That basically is targeting those data center cost reductions so you can move that workload to the cloud and focus on innovation as opposed to managing infrastructure, which again then starts helping you achieve more of the new things and features people want to solve problems in your organization. So it's not an overly complex process to move your content server lift and shift to the cloud, whether it's on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure or even a third-party cloud infrastructure like Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud Platform. That model is all about leveraging IaaS, infrastructure as a service, to deploy the Web Center content. And we've done that recently with Azure and AWS, just to name a couple of them. It's actually a fairly straightforward process, and it still provides you some capability to bring your own license once you follow a little bit of the outline in terms of managing the expectation on how your configuration is set up in that environment. Next is the running Web Center Portal Cloud Service as a front end to Web Center content. So as an option to complete that WCC instance moves to the cloud, you might take advantage of a portal platform. Many of our customers have created their own UIs on top of Web Center content. We've created UIs on top of Web Center content, and you might want to take advantage of just serving up that content and that experience through the portal platform as opposed to deploying lift and shift to an IaaS platform. The platform as a service model, in this case for Web Center Portal Cloud Service, is still customer managed at this point, but Oracle has it on their roadmap to make this an Oracle managed environment. It runs Web Center 12c, it runs on top of the Java Cloud Service, and it can run prod and non-prod environments quickly, and you can easily stand those up. And obviously that portal gives you an option to provide a UI on top of Web Center to enhance the experience and adoption for challenges you might have in your environment. So Web Center Portal Cloud Service is a subscription-based service, and there are some prerequisites to it being set up. So database service, Java Cloud Service, and storage is required to make that work, and it allows you to be flexible and scale in and out from a cloud-based management environment, and it's highly available and secure. So without having to install Web Center Portal or Web Center content on-prem or on an IaaS platform, you can just spin up Web Center Portal Cloud Service and focus on the application tier and development and delivery of that app as opposed to managing that infrastructure. Another option to consider when you're looking at trying to manage your content in either on-prem or in the cloud is to treat it as a hybrid ECM, or maybe take a full move to Content and Experience Cloud. Hybrid ECM basically means that you're sharing platform infrastructure on the cloud as well as on-prem to kind of solve that accessibility and business problems. Oracle Content Experience Cloud is one of those targeted environments you might make a migration to. It is the single source of truth, content hub and delivery hub for the cloud platform. Oracle Content Experience Cloud provides web access, social features, direct mobile access, chatbot integration, and email, all through that hub, and uses either a documents model or an assets model for headless content publishing to multiple delivery channels. So what makes up Oracle Content or Oracle Content Experience Cloud? There's basically 6 main areas of the platform today, with new ones coming. We were on a partner call this morning with new features and capabilities that are coming to the Oracle Content Management Platform. But basically, as it sits today, it's made up of analytics and conversations, sites for building websites, documents for file sync and share, or sharing documents within sites, or assets, and working with repositories and collections and taxonomies to drive those delivery channels either through your own site that's built through sites, or a headless model where it might be consumed by a progressive web app, a mobile app, or your own custom development to consume those sites, or integration with some of the SaaS platforms like Eloqua, e-commerce, and so forth. Then extending OCE with these other platforms like Visual Builder, integrations, and workflow, and maybe even non-Oracle cloud storage options. So what does that kind of look like? If you kind of take an ECM hybrid scenario with WebCenter content and Oracle Content Experience Cloud, you might be using WebCenter with framework folders and enterprise libraries, and Oracle Content Experience Cloud has a native integration to WebCenter and has a connector that will allow you to push content from WebCenter to Oracle Content Experience Cloud. That integration might also include OneDrive, Google Drive, or SharePoint Online. There are natural integrations to consume content from those sources into the hub of Oracle Content Experience Cloud, and maybe use them directly as is, or work with Oracle Visual Builder Cloud Service or Oracle Process Cloud, and maybe provide some integrations and build an application that consumes those apps into a portal or website. So a little bit of comparison from Oracle WebCenter to OCE. They're not a feature like for like type of scenario between WebCenter content and Oracle Content Experience Cloud. The parity just isn't there to the date. Oracle is working to provide more of those features, but Oracle WebCenter content on-prem or on IaaS scenario is more of a millions or multi-millions of content items, enterprise content management with retention, has limited file sharing outside the organization, but you maintain a key system infrastructure on-premise. Oracle Content Experience Cloud might be more targeted to the less than 5 million type of assets or documents and content volume. Retention, as of this time, is not a big concern. However, there are capabilities coming in future releases of OCE that are going to handle retention, but it's more along the lines of omni-channel distribution, inside and outside. So either you create and curate the content within that platform, or you push it from WebCenter content and maybe some internal workflows and approvals, and then that experience is then driven by cloud-centric strategies in terms of platform as a service. So you would use OCE as that hub to push that content out to multiple areas. So that's just a quick little view in terms of some of the features and interoperability and where Oracle's going with that. I'm going to turn it over to Greg Ballum. He's going to talk a little bit about the WebCenter and Teams integration from Fishbowl. Greg?
Thanks, Jerry. So as we've been talking with our customers over the last 12 to 18 months or so, we've discovered that most of them are increasing their usage of Office 365, including Microsoft Teams. So as many of you know, the COVID pandemic has accelerated adoption of online collaboration tools, working remotely, and things like Microsoft Teams. Based on our conversations, many of the companies that we've talked to begin using Teams primarily for video conferencing, and then as users become more familiar with it, they start to leverage more of the collaboration features. And Teams provides a number of different storage options, including OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. Users want to be able to find and work with files stored anywhere without having to switch between multiple applications. So many organizations are working to formalize and educate their users on content life cycles, and specifically when to store files and which locations at different times. So content commonly begins with a single author, may be stored in their OneDrive, and as it evolves, can be collaborated on using Teams, shared in SharePoint, and at some point, it may require workflow approvals, distribution to the broader organization, or archival and retention to be applied using WebCenter. So at Fishbowl, we've been working to develop a Microsoft Teams application that will allow users to search, upload, and work with files stored in WebCenter content directly through Teams. So that's what I will be demonstrating today, are a few of the features in that application. And we will be making a beta version of the application available soon. And if you're interested in participating in that beta program, please contact your accountant. So at this point, you can stop sharing and I will share my screen to provide a brief demo. Okay, so for those of you familiar, I'm just logged into a Microsoft Teams team right now. And what we've done is we've added a couple of different things through our Teams application. The first I'm going to show you is what they call a messaging extension. So from the top menu bar, users are able to go to WebCenter and search for files that are stored inside of WebCenter. Those files can be, you can see the details, you can interact with them to some extent through the web viewable, content info. If you have the Office Online integration we have, you can view and edit those files in Office Online. It's also possible to copy these cards and use them in a chat conversation. So I'll switch, there's a WebCenter app that shows up if this is available in your organization. It provides chat, WebCenter files, and some other additional information. So if you search and find documents that are inside of WebCenter, you're able to copy those and paste those into the chat to share links with your team or with other people, or to just make notes to yourself or things like that through Teams. The other piece that we have is a WebCenter Files tab, and this allows users to search and navigate content, view content that's inside of WebCenter, upload new versions, upload and download files, interact with their workflows and things like that. So the initial display is just going to be a list of recent items. Users can navigate based on folder structures if you use the folders inside of WebCenter content. They can also navigate based on profile and search files within the different profiles, as well as workflow content. So my workflow items or any of the other active workflows that are available in the system. So I'll real quickly go through and upload a new document. So if I check this in, I can select files, and in this case, I can select them either from my local storage, or I'm actually going to select a couple of files from my OneDrive and upload those directly into WebCenter. We'll add those there. The interface allows you to vary your metadata based on the files. So if I put in demo document 1, I can upload the first document, and then I can switch that and then upload the second document. And then once those are uploaded, I'll refresh this and you can see they've actually gone into my workflow queue. We have the ability to view and edit in Office Online very simply just by clicking the icon. You can edit, make changes to those documents right through the browser very easily. Once the versions have been approved, you can select whatever items. We allow you to do multiple approvals and rejections. So if you wanted to reject, you can enter messages or do multiple approvals, and those documents then will be released. We also allow you to download multiple versions of the file, or multiple files at one time. You can select which rendition you want. If you want to zip the files before you download them. So it's easy to get files out of WebCenter if you want to move them around or share them through Teams that way. You can do that. Similarly, we let you delete multiple files and things like that. If you want to delete versions. Again, you can update metadata, view previous revisions, all of those kind of things. So really allowing you to interact with any of the content that you have inside of WebCenter right from within the Teams UI. So Jerry, I think I'll turn it back over to you. That's all I have for the demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. So let's just kind of close the loop here real quick before we get into answering some questions. So just a quick follow-up on what we covered today. I want to make sure everybody's aware. There is a future for WebCenter. there's 12C features and there's a 14C plan. And one of the questions was WebCenter Portal going to move to 14C? And yes, that is on the roadmap. We didn't talk a lot about that, but it is on the roadmap for 14C. Next, being aware of WebCenter scalability and manageability from a Docker's and Kubernetes perspective, containerization on-prem or in the cloud is going to be supported. We want to make you guys aware that there are multiple ways of handling that cloud strategy and your content in the cloud. And either a slow move or a big bang move can be handled from that perspective, but there's definitely different ways we can get you from on-prem to the cloud. And with those customers who are engaging in collaboration tools like Teams, not just for the WebEx portion of it or the Zoom portion of it, so to speak, it's collaboration activities and sharing the content and using that UI as that front end or that top layer to interacting with content as well as other areas of Teams is a very powerful tool and some interesting use cases that can help you in your environment. So with that, why don't we kind of flip over to Jason?
Yeah, so we do have a few minutes left. There's been some questions submitted through the Q&A icon. Jerry's going to answer a few of those, but if you have questions you want to ask right now, please type them in the Q&A icon and we'll get to those. So Jerry, why don't you get started on the ones you want to answer?
Absolutely. So somebody asked any features in 12C or 14C that support integration with cloud solutions like Box. Inherently, 12C and 14C, not specifically. The way to do that is through other capabilities like Oracle Integration Cloud or some API cloud that would give you access to that. So OCE is one type of integration pattern where you can bring those in and use that as a source and then bring that other stuff together with WCC on-prem to that hub of Oracle Content Experience Cloud. So depending on the pattern and use case, we can definitely handle that, but not natively a 12C or 14C feature. I think I answered the question earlier about WebCenter Portal moving to 14C. The answer is yes, and they are continuing to invest on-prem. Hopefully you've seen a little bit of that today. There are more things in the release notes for 12C ever since 2016, so you can actually see what's been rolled out over the last few years. Another quick one is a customer of ours using Fishbowl in a box, or what we call now Portal Solution Accelerator, in terms of how we work with Portal and WebCenter content, and ask whether or not that migrates to OCE. So natively, not necessarily a one-for-one migration, but the way it's broken out front end and back end, the front end can go into OCE sites, and the back end can still be content server with the Groovy scripts you have, or the Groovy scripts are replaced, and if you're going to store your content in OCE, we would adjust that to work with the APIs on OCE. And lastly, looks like we've got this one here, is access permissions inherited from WCC when searching for and opening files in Teams and on the Teams add-in? So I'll answer it quickly, yes. But Greg, do you want to elaborate on that question?
Yeah, so everything that's exposed through the Teams application, as far as the WebCenter files and all that functionality, that is all operating as whichever user you're signed into WebCenter as. So yes, it does respect all the WebCenter permissions.
There's another one about asking about expanding on Docker's Kubernetes. Probably don't have the time to cover the detail of that today, but if you want to get in contact with us, we can have that conversation offline and give you a little bit more detail around that. And then any certifications for WebCenter Content 12C. I'm not sure how you're asking that. If you're asking if there are like learning certifications, training certifications for that, so I'm not sure the exact question. If you want,
if you could elaborate on your question there, that'd be helpful. And then there's a question about search in Teams.
Yeah, what search is used when doing Teams search?
So in the demo version that I gave, it's using essentially similar to the quick search. So it's going to be using whatever search you have enabled inside of WebCenter. So whether that's the metadata search, the Oracle text search, or the Elastic search, it's going to use whichever one of those is configured. If you're using something else, a third-party search product like a Mindbreeze or something like that, I'm sure we could set it up to search against that as well.
All right, well, we're not seeing any other questions, so we appreciate all those questions. And as Jerry said, for those questions we weren't able to answer, we will look to get in touch with those individuals and get those answered for you offline. But we're going to conclude today's webinar. I want to thank you again for attending. Like I said at the beginning, this webinar was recorded. Everyone will be sent a link to the recording where you'll be able to review the presentation with audio. So thanks again, and we hope that you can join our future webinars. We'll be talking to you more down the road. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.